Good morning, Honorable Amor, Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, other representative of the Government of Barbados, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, my colleagues, head of agencies, here being present, and as well online, Ambassador Francois Jackman, Permanent Representative of Barbados to the United Nations in New York, members of the media. Really good morning. This is an important day today, and I'm really thrilled to join you, Prime Minister, and representative of the government here today at Ilaro Court, as we participate in an important signing ceremony. But before that, first, I once again wish to congratulate Barbados on becoming a republic. I was very pleased to join you during the celebrations in this, what I would call a pivotal moment in the history of Barbados. I was also very delighted, Prime Minister, that the Ambassador Rihanna Fenty was nominated as a national hero and thereby contribute that Barbados continue to shine across the globe. I wish you, Prime Minister, the new President, the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason, the entire government and people of Barbados, the very, very best wishes in your efforts to improve the quality of life of Barbadians. And I must say that today's signing is also very timely, as it coincides with the Barbados 55th anniversary of its membership with the United Nations, given that the General Assembly had formally endorsed the resolution for membership of Barbados on the 9th of December 1966. So with such historical milestone, Today, I believe, is a momentous occasion as we officially move into a new era of collaboration between the government of Barbados and the United Nations development system. So this is illustrated today with the signing of the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for the Caribbean region, and that will cover the years 2022 to 2026. And this comes after a year of consultations with governments, with civil society, with regional institutions, with private sector, international development partners from the region. So I think we have arrived at a point where there is a clear roadmap for how the UN will support Caribbean countries and Barbados to achieve what was considered by all of us an urgent priority, or two urgent priorities. First, to accelerate progress towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, and two, to facilitate a faster recovery from the socio-economic and health impact of the COVID-19 pandemics. And I have to say that perhaps no previous cooperation framework has been as significant as this one, since we're living in an unprecedented global pandemic that shows yet no clear end in sight. A climate crisis which poses an existential threat, especially to small island developing states, and you have recently, again and again, Prime Minister stated that. And of course also a worsening fiscal situation, including increasing unsustainable level of debt and limited fiscal space for seeds. Prime Minister, you're a very strong advocate for seeds, and very consistently making the case for increased support to vulnerable nations. And we are very deeply appreciative of your support for stronger multilateralisms, but also strong moral leadership to deal with those multiple crises of our time. And like you, I want to say that we believe it is possible to achieve sustainable development, but so much changes are needed, right? So this is against this background that this new cooperation framework provides, in our view, a renewed focus from the UN to step up our efforts to partner with all Caribbean states. And to that extent, we have jointly identified 4 key priority areas that we believe will support countries to achieve resilient, sustainable development in the region. So first, unlike the previous MSDF, we have increased our support to the economic resilience agenda. So in this regard, we propose to deploy the full assets of the UN development system to increase, for example, competitiveness of the business ecosystem at national level, to enhance government efforts to diversify their economies and also to manage debt. So these are, we know, absolute imperatives for economic recovery from COVID-19 pandemic and also for mitigating against future potential external shocks. Secondly, we'll intensify our efforts to ensure that no one is left behind in the quest to transform economies, but also to improve the well-being of citizens. And to ensure the realization of human rights for all, we'll support the design and adoption of policies to eliminate all forms of discrimination and support measures to reduce structural inequalities. The UN will support government efforts to ensure equal access to quality social services and, for example, in health and education, or universal shock-responsive social protection. And I must say, we are already piloting this in Barbados through a joint program with the Ministry of People Empowerment. Thirdly, and one of the most important priority perhaps in the area of climate change and natural capital, the MSDCF reflects our strong commitment to enhancing national capacity for gender-responsive disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation and mitigation. So at the same time, we'll strengthen our support on natural resources and ecosystem management. And the last and fourth pillar will deliver UN support for ensuring that Caribbean countries remain peaceful and just societies. So we'll further scale up our cooperation as UN family for increased access to justice, promote social cohesion, and improve community safety and security. And of course, to achieve those priority partnerships is key. So we continue to strengthen your existing partnership, but also to build the new ones that are required, and also to increase financing at scale that will need to be mobilized and support countries accordingly, especially in the areas of innovative finance, with vulnerability being key in this regards, and continue to support appropriate citizen engagement. So, Prime Minister, as the immediate next step, will operationalize our commitment through the preparation of a first 2-year country implementation plan for Barbados. And this will translate our broad commitment that I have just mentioned of the cooperation framework into a very tailored and actionable plan for implementation that will bring the entire UN system as one behind this ambition. And this is also a change in our business model, Prime Minister. So we would welcome your leadership in the process of preparing the CAP for the next 2 years. And that will be done in the next couple of months, I believe, to ensure that it is not only well aligned with Barbados' development needs and priorities, but also to make sure that it reflects your expectations with regards to the cooperation from the United Nations in Barbados. So I'll end here, and I want to thank you for your presence today, for your trust, for your commitment, and we really look forward to a very continuous, fruitful cooperation with Barbados, with your government, and with the people of Barbados to deliver on this commitment. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Didier. Heads of agencies of the United Nations, members of the government of Barbados, friends all. Today is a special day for us as well, because in the midst of all that we are facing in this pandemic, and in the midst of all that we are fighting in the climate crisis, one is likely to forget the original development objectives that we set out as an independent nation to achieve. It is, for me, important to remind us all that these goals remain ever present and remain our motivation still for coming to work every day and doing better for the people of our country and our region. It is significant to me that your report regrets the fact, as do we, that there is likely to be significant difficulties and challenges with respect to meeting the SDGs given the existence of the pandemic that is protracted now and given the continued escalating crises that we face with climate. You have indicated in this report that SDGs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are at risk. And it is significant that so significant that we need to break it out into ordinary language. It sounds easy to those of you in here who work for the United Nations system. But what does SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mean? That we're going to have problems in the battle with poverty. That we're going to have problems in making sure that people don't go hungry. That we're going to have problems in making sure that people have access to good health and well-being, as we know is already happening in the pandemic. That we're going to have problems in delivering quality education. And who have been the greatest victims of this pandemic, if not our children across the world, many of whom have been denied access to education because they don't have access to either, in some instances in other countries, electricity, and in our own country as well, and other countries, online tools in order to be able to receive it. But even if they did, the absence of the ability to mix and to mature and grow in the interaction that is provided in a school environment means that the social and emotional learning targets that we would expect to be attained by children would be affected. Similarly, when we talk about SDG 5, that women are the ones who have been regrettably on the front line of this crisis. I've already made the point that in our own country, female unemployment actually, for the first time certainly in my living memory, was lower than male unemployment in Barbados for 18 months prior to the start of the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, female unemployment shot way above male unemployment for the first time, again, in that 18-month period. And SDG 6 is what we already know too, about clean water and sanitation. And for a government that came to office with sewage running in the streets, this is not an esoteric SDG. This is one that is pivotal. And for a government who has to face the fact that our major concern with the climate crisis is in fact our access to groundwater, then this is all the more important for us. So my friends, we are here not to be bureaucratic, not to be esoteric, not to be irrelevant, but in truth and in fact, to go to the heart of what we are facing as developing nations, as small island developing states, and being able to put in place the mechanisms recognizing that one of the deficiencies of small island developing states is the absence of capacity. Capacity because it is the same people who are fighting the battles on all of these fronts. It's the same people who have to craft the policies with respect to dealing and fighting inequity. And when we consider that we were already managing a deficit inherited at the point of independence, then we begin to appreciate that it is absolutely critical that we now start to speak in one voice on one development trajectory, to continue to parse development into climate crisis, or pandemic, or the AMR pandemic that's going to come, which I've been working with your agencies to try to avoid, or indeed the problems that our soils are going to face in another 40, 50 years, is foolishness. Because all of them relate to whether people can live, whether people can support their families, whether people can access prosperity, whether people can have equity, whether people can remove discrimination from being a feature of their lives or a threat of it in their lives. And to that extent, therefore, it is why I believe that I must be one of the strongest supporters of the United Nations Secretary General. I believe that Antonio Guterres is a man that the world needs his voice now more than ever. I believe that the common agenda is absolutely critical to save the world and to put the world on its right path. I believe that Barbados' resolution, which was co-sponsored by 166 nations after my speech at the General Assembly in September, is the direction that we want to go in, and the fact that we were able to have it accepted by acclaim. I want to congratulate our ambassador, our permanent representative at the UN, Francois Jackman, for leading the effort for me once we had to depart the jurisdiction of the United Nations headquarters, and ensuring that our country was able, in spite of its small size, to be able to remind the world that more than ever we have a common agenda, and that more than ever we are needed to cooperate, because our children and our children's children, as trite as it sounds, absolutely demand it and require it. The notion of failed states, of failed species, is well known to mankind and history. And that we have persons in our midst globally who believe that it is something that it is out of reach and is not a possibility for us, reflects a human arrogance that is too heavy a burden for the global population to bear. We are in the midst of battles that go to the very heart of the existence of human beings and of the planet as we know it. The notion that our soils can be at risk in terms of reducing the amount of food produced in 50, 60 years is frightening. The notion that antimicrobial resistance can mean that more and more people will die from superviruses without having access to the medication and the therapeutics necessary to be able to save them and their lives, or to save the human experience of going to the dentist or having a baby without the threat of death. These are the things that are at stake. And that we can continue to find a world that is prepared to fight specious battles or to fight wars that are unnecessary, when simple battling for life and simple battling for equity and simple battling for fairness is being put at risk. I hope, therefore, that the actions of our governments will send the message that there are more and more and more of us who want to see the common agenda implemented, who want to be able to recognize that we are human beings with a mind, and we can learn from history. And the events of today, as I said ironically in September 2018 when I first addressed the UN General Assembly, the events of the world today are looking too much like the events of the world 100 years ago. And the difference, however, is this. 100 years ago, we did not have the Charter. We did not have the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. We did not have the United Nations. And even though the United Nations is urgently in need of reform, so it does not continue to reflect a colonial experience, but an independent world that has developed since the establishment of the UN, even though there is need for that reform, the United Nations is the one entity that should cause us not to repeat the mistakes of a century ago. So, we are but one country, we are but one people, we are but one region. But we are a civilization that has known what it is to face the worst of human behavior and morality. And because we have faced the worst, and because in our name people have used our country's names and our parliaments to inflict on others the most horrific behaviors, then those of us who exist today have a moral obligation to be able to ensure that our name is associated with good, our name is associated with civilizing conditions, our name is associated with equity, our name is associated with fairness, our name is associated with transparency, our name is associated with accountability, our name is associated with prosperity. Our name must no longer be associated with a 1661 slave code or mechanisms that were intended to make one race superior and one group of people and one geographical region superior. So my friends, we sign today with pride, we sign today conscious that the bottom line is that Barbados is only continuing to be consistent in its message and its call for that kind of global moral strategic leadership that we believe that the common agenda underpins, and that the Secretary General has been consistent in his advocacy, in his arguments, in his interactions with all of us to be able to ensure that that better world can be created. I want to thank Didier and all of the heads of agencies here too, because the truth is that you all have done well by standing by us in the region. There's obviously more that we can do, there's obviously more that we need, but we appreciate that many of the big battles that are before us are not at the level of UN agencies anymore. It's at the level of the political will of those countries who need to see better, do better, feel better, and hear better. And to that extent, we thank you for holding the fort, while we continue to fight those major political battles that hopefully will give multilateralism its true victory and not continue to have it as if it is floundering on the footpath of a 21st century that is arcing back towards populism and nationalism in a most unfortunate way. So thank you, and let us say.
Let us sign.
How many countries have to sign now?
10, as far as I'm concerned. We have another one on Monday.
Gaston.
Gaston, yes. Then Ralph, beginning of January. Then Mr. Mitchell. Oh, we exchange?